A lot of French bread, for example, if you're making a traditional baguette, you use a pre-ferment, or what they call here a poolish. So that's just a very wet mixture. It's usually about equal quantities of flour and water, so that's 100% hydration. So into that mixture you put a little bit of yeast, and what it does, it creates a very, very active piece of fermented dough or batter. Then you then add the rest of the flour in the recipe too, and that's how it mimics the traditional effect of a sourdough starter. And when baker's yeast was invented, people stopped using sourdough. It was obviously a lot easier to use baker's yeast because it's quicker and more reliable. But what happened was that people lamented the lack of flavour in the bread, so they started using pre-ferments or poolishes. In Italy you'd use what's called a biga, which is pretty much the same thing as a poolish, but it's a lot thicker. So on our trip to the supermarket we picked up some flour. So what we've got here is farine de blé, which is wheat flour, T65. Pour pain de tradition française. Et toutes vos recettes gourmandes. So it's for traditional French bread and all of your gourmand recipes. And again, just go half and half. Oops. A little bit of yeast. Already I can tell this is like a softer flour than what I'm used to using. So at home I use a blend of British wheat and Canadian wheat, and it's very, very high in protein. Whereas French flour tends to be like slightly what they call softer. So for example, a lot of baguettes are made with T55 flour. It's got a softer quality to the gluten. It's got more gliadin in relation to the amount of gluten than what the Canadian wheat does. Canadian wheat is extremely strong. There we are. So that's all we need to do with that, and we'll put that away, and this one probably will be for tomorrow. Now for the actual oven, obviously there's not one in the little chalet that we're staying in, but I did bring my Dutch oven with me, and handily there's a barbecue here. So we went out this morning, and on the way back from the supermarket we collected some wood. I also picked up a bag of charcoal. So hopefully between the wood and the charcoal we can get a nice fire going, and then we use the Dutch oven to do the baking. The starter that I made yesterday was in the fridge overnight. What I've done with it, I've divided it into 2 bowls and added a little bit more flour, and as you can see, it's very, very active. So for this one, I'm going to pop it into the bowl. So we'll go with our white flour, and this time I'm going to put about twice as much flour as there is starch. It's going to be about 30% starter to the amount of flour. So if the flour is 100%, the starter is going to be 30% of that. So obviously I've got no scale, so it's just a case of guessing it. Let's try that. And then again we're going to guess the salt. More. Should do. It's going to be quite a small loaf, this one, but there are limits to how much bread you can eat. I'm not even going to try and knead this one. So what I'll do, I'll just I'll give it some more stretch and folds as it develops. I'll give it a couple of them while it's rising. put it back into this bowl temporarily while I mix the other dough. The other bowl of starter. So in France this is called a poolish. It's quite a wet mixture, whereas in Italian baking they call it a biga, and it's a lot drier. Fundamentally though it's the same thing. It's just a pre-fermented flour. I've used up all my French flour, but luckily I brought some wheat flour with me. Now into this one, we're going to get a little bit more exotic. We're going to put some flavours into this. So I've just been out for a walk and I managed to find some aniseed. So put a bit of that in. I must admit I do like aniseed, but it can be very overpowering. And then some salt. And then some of these extremely expensive pine nuts. These are expensive in the UK, but in France, my God. In, and then equally expensive cranberries. And with the water. Again, I'm not worried about kneading it. We'll let nature do that. That's the thing about thyme, it will actually knead the bread for you, so all you need to do is basically leave the bread, and what it'll do, the gluten molecules will absorb the water from the dough, and they'll plump up and they'll form themselves into long chains, which is what gives your dough the extensibility. So when the yeast creates bubbles and raises the dough, if it's got long elastic chains, then the dough can rise further before those chains eventually snap. So when you overproof a loaf, that's what's happened. Basically those chains of gluten that have all formed stretch and stretch and stretch and stretch and stretch until eventually they just snap, and then the dough just collapses back on itself because it's got no strength left. And this one smells great. There we are, we'll leave these two to let nature do its thing. It's pretty hot and dry here, so I'm going to use these bowls just to cover the dough and stop it drying out and getting the crust on the outside. Also, it'll keep the flies off it. That was surprisingly easy. Right, we shall keep one of them unsullied because Rosie's not a fan of herbs, spices or anything flavoursome. And with the other one, we'll give it a good marinate. We'll give it a good seasoning. The bird song makes a lovely relaxing backdrop to the cooking. Some of this lovely garlic. And then we'll use a bit more of aniseed. And finally a bit of oil. And we'll just work that marinade into the chicken a bit. There we are, it smells pretty good, so we'll stick that in the fridge for a couple of hours until it's time to cook. The dough's starting to look really good now. Time to re-employ our couche cloth from yesterday. and it can have its final rise inside the cloth. And this one I'm going to go and pop in the fridge just to keep it cool, because we're going to cook this one first. Obviously, like any self-respecting baker, I wouldn't go on holiday without my Dutch oven. We'll give that a preheat for a good 5 minutes or so.
Kathy Todd.
You can taste the faint hint of aniseed, which is quite delicious, and the sweet and the savoury effect of the pine nuts and the cranberries is rather marvellous. So I have to say I'm quite pleased with this bread. We might make this one again, Rosamund. Now look for the full. We should have a bowl for dipping the whole loaf in.
That's not wine.
That's just what peasants do. Very good.